What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's that time of week, time to go over my starts and sits at the running back position. We gained a lot of information in week one, and we're going to learn plenty more in the coming weeks. Now, for this start sit video, I am going to go back to the old setup. You guys have recommended we go back to that, with the one caveat being I want to spend more time on the more difficult situations. So for pretty much the top 10 or 12, I'm just going to say, hey, start Dalvin Cook, start Christian McCaffrey. We don't need to go into any more detail on that. I want this to be your guys' go-to for like start sit decisions at the running back position. And so I would rather spend more of our time here talking about the players you might actually be deciding between. Now, you can also answer all of your questions if I don't get to it in this video. I think I will. I'm going to touch on every running back. But if I want to answer your like specific question, things are really, really close. My projections are on the website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, so you can see under your exact scoring format, what would my decision be. So with that, let's get things started off as usual. Stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was there were 3 running backs in week 1 to exceed 6 receptions. Christian McCaffrey, of course, then also DeAndre Swift, and who was the third? The answer is Jamal Williams. Big Blue, and then a bunch of X's got that first on YouTube. And at Bryce Rubens was the first to get that right on Twitter. Today's stat, another 3 running back stat. Only 3 running backs in week 1 had at least 16 carries, but posted less than 10 half PPR points. Najee Harris was 1, James Conner was 2, who was the third? Okay, so let's get things started off with Texans at Browns, a game that should be quite embarrassing to watch, although I thought the Jaguars would win week 1, although that was a 3-point spread. We've got a 12.5-point spread in this one, so we've got Browns at home, favored by 12.5. The line actually opened at 11.5, so it's being bet onto the Browns side even more. And the game has a 48-point total that is relatively high, but with the spread being that much, it's basically them saying, I think the Browns going to score a ton of points, and the Texans are not. So let's start off with Houston. I understand that their running backs scored a lot. They all scored a touchdown. They all did decently in fantasy in week 1. That's going to happen when you score, was it 37 points, something crazy like that in week 1. And I know Ingram had 26 carries, which is currently second in the entire NFL. But this is the Browns, right? This is a significantly better defense that they'll be facing than Jacksonville last week. And despite what you saw in the Kansas City game, like the Browns have a really, really rock solid defense. I have all of Houston's running backs currently ranked outside of the top 45. So if for some reason you're looking in that range in week 2, that's a bit scary. You better be in like an 18-team league. But you know, given how well they performed, I think a lot of people might be looking at them for some reason. Just please leave them on your bench. If for some reason you're not trying to trade high on them, at least keep them on your bench. You're not going to be wanting to start Houston this week, at least for the running backs. As for the Browns, obviously start Nick Chubb in just a dream matchup. As of recording this, he is tied in half PPR with Dalvin Cook for second in my running back projection. So you're starting him. And then right now I have Hunt 25th, but all of the running backs from like 21 through 30 are projected within 0.7 points of each other. So we have a huge range of that like low end 2 to flex play where most of them are interchangeable. Very small differences, like 1 carry is going to be the difference between a lot of these guys. And so really your decision there comes down to your confidence level in each. And I do have a lot of confidence in Kareem Hunt this week. He's got a really good chance of scoring a touchdown. So he's a lock for like decent volume. You're not really going to have a game script where Kareem Hunt has no touches. Like he's going to get some carries. He's going to get some targets. He's probably going to get some looks when they get close to the end zone. And so add all of that up, and over time, he's going to be worth a running back 2 or a flex play this week. So I don't personally own him in any of my 3 leagues, but if I did, I'd feel pretty good about starting him this week. Next up, we've got Broncos at Jaguars. This game is a 45-point total. It opened at 44 points, so it's been bet up a little bit. And the Broncos are 6-point road favorites. For those Broncos, I have Williams and Gordon with the exact same projection. Actually, I didn't like plan it out like that, but they have the exact same projection. And both are in that same range as Kareem Hunt. This is a good matchup, and while the total overall isn't high, Denver as a team is projected to score 25 and a half total points, which is decent, right? That's not, this week is actually a really, really high scoring for a few teams, and so I believe that's like 13th highest on the week, but it's still good. Like 25 and a half points is a really solid projection. I talked about Melvin Gordon in depth in the running back trade targets video, so watch that if you want a longer take on my expectations from him moving forward. But know that the majority of his production last week, it did come on that one long touchdown run on his final touch of the game. Before that, he hadn't done all that much. This one is really going to come down to that exact same thing. Which one of these guys scores a touchdown, right? If neither scores a touchdown, you're probably going to be disappointed in both of them. If one of them scores, they'll probably have enough in terms of like carries, in terms of targets with that touchdown to where you're like, wow, that was a really, really decent start. I'd say their touchdown chances are good. Again, they're favorites, high team total, bad defense going up against the Jaguars. But it's basically, do you think one's going to score? I don't think many of you own both of them. If you did own both of them, I think my lean would be Melvin Gordon by like a hair. But again, they have the exact same projection. So honestly, flip a coin or just go with who you think is going to score that touchdown. For the Jaguars, it is a split as well, but this is a much more difficult matchup, and their team total reflects that, really 19 and a half points. Last week, Hyde operated as the early down back with Robinson getting some carries, but then also getting a lot more of the targets. And so his role is more valuable, right? Because targets are worth so much more than carries are. But it's still gross. Like Robinson's the one you want to own, the one you would be starting. But Denver has such a good defense, and we know that both backs are going to be inefficient in this game. We know that both backs have a low chance of a touchdown. I'd keep them both on the bench. Like, obviously, you guys know keep Hyde on the bench, but I would keep James Robinson on the bench this week because I don't really have all that much confidence. I want to see one more week. I want to see, like, maybe last week they just got punched in the mouth and they didn't know how to work because they were like, we thought we'd win this game. We're getting dominated. So maybe the game script was a little bit different than they expected. I want to see this week them going in kind of knowing they're going to lose this time. What are the touches? If we're seeing this same split, I'm not going to have a lot of confidence in either running back moving forward, and I want to see that this week, so I keep him on the bench. Bills at Dolphins is up next. This game has a 48-point total, and the Bills are 3.5-point road favorites. For the Bills, the only running back you would be considering is Devin Singletary, and I do have him as flex viable this week. He played 75% of the snaps in week 1, getting 11 carries and 5 targets. That's not like elite usage, especially for like a lead back, but it's a lot more than they gave any other running back last season. So they had, Moss and Singletary last year. Neither of them was getting that sort of workload. Moss was like a semi-surprise inactive. I say semi-surprise because there were definitely reports out of camp that Singletary was playing well, that Moss wasn't separating, and nothing was indicating that either one was like the clear guy. And so when you see one be inactive, it wasn't as surprising as like the Trey Sermon inactive. That was very surprising because Sermon was like the 1B throughout all of camp. Singletary was playing well throughout camp and Moss really wasn't. So this wasn't overly surprising. I would say that if Moss ended up being like active this week, then I have a lot less confidence in Singletary. But assuming that Moss is still inactive, I would be fine using Singletary as a running back 2 or in my flex. For the Dolphins, we've got a bit of a mess. Gaskin is the clear lead back, but Salvin Ahmed is absolutely going to mix in for a few touches. He's going to get some carries. He's going to get some targets. We know Malcolm Brown is going to play on some pass down snaps. We know he's going to be used inside the 10-yard line. He got the only carry inside the 10-yard line last week. So again, like Gaskin he's clearly the number 1 running back, but if you have these other two mixing in, it still hurts him. The matchup also isn't easy. This is a Bills defense that held Najee Harris to 49 total yards on 17 touches. Like, I'm fine using Gaskin at running back 2 if you need to, but I would prefer if you had a better running back, or I'd honestly prefer if you were moving him to the flex. So I just would rather have a wide receiver in the flex spot. So I personally wouldn't like to use him this week. I don't have him on any team, so I can't give you an actual decision that I'm making, but I wouldn't use him if I had him. Next up, we've got the Bengals at the Bears. This game has a 45-point total. That's pretty low. The Bears are 2-point home favorites. That has been bet down. They opened as 3-point favorites, so the line is moving in favor of the Bengals. For the Bengals, Joe Mixon saw usage that very few running backs can even dream of having. And so I don't care what the matchup is. You're starting Joe Mixon every week. For the Bears, Montgomery looked really, really good. And he is going to crush it whenever Justin Fields takes over. Unfortunately, at least as of recording this right now, that hasn't happened this week. It doesn't look like it's going to happen this week. Hopefully, you guys are watching this and you're like, no, Nick, Fields, he's taking over finally. That would be fantastic. I'd be very excited if that happened, especially because I have Fields as the backup quarterback in our 16-team subscriber league. But doesn't look like it's going to happen this week. I still think that Montgomery is a must-play every week, especially as a home favorite in a winnable matchup. This week, I think he's like a top 15 to 17 running back, pretty much regardless of the format. And should be in your lineups, but he is going to be so good when Fields takes over. 49ers at Eagles. This one's next. This game is a pretty high 50-point total, up from 48 to start the week, so this one's getting bet up. And the 49ers are 3-point road favorites. For those 49ers, a lot of unknowns, right? I think we learned, or we're going to learn a lot with Trenton Cannon, right? So they pick up Cannon. Cannon gets cut from the Ravens. They add him. If Cannon ends up being active over Trey Sermon, which we're not going to know, right, probably until like Sunday morning, but if that ends up happening, I will have a lot more confidence in Elijah Mitchell. And that might sound confusing, but think about it. If Sermon is active, now we're in a little bit of unknown territory because like Sermon is the more talented running back. Like maybe he's in the doghouse, maybe he's not learning the playbook, maybe he's not performing that well, right? And those things aren't like maybe. Shanahan's come out and said he's not performing well. But does he do something over this week that solidifies some sort of role when they activate him? Does Elijah Mitchell fumble and now Sermon takes over? Like there are a lot more unknowns. But if Sermon continues to be inactive, we know Trenton Cannon's not all that good, and he's not going to get much of a game plan, or he's not going to be used much in the game plan. And so I'd have much more confidence in Mitchell if Cannon's active over Sermon. If Sermon's activated, you're basically down to trusting Kyle Shanahan rotation. That's not going to feel good. I would ultimately just watch the rankings with this one. Hopefully we learn more on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. Right now, I don't think anyone could possibly feel amazing about this decision. My projections have Elijah Mitchell 28th, Hasty 52nd, Sermon 57th, and I'm assuming Cannon is inactive under that. But who knows? I mean, who really knows what's going to happen? Mitchell is flex viable, but you probably add him off free agency. And so if you don't need to start him, I might not. In all of my leagues, I did not put in much of a waiver claim for him, and people just blew it out of the water with how much they spent on him. And so I don't have him. Again, I cannot tell you what decision I am making, but personally, he'd probably be flex viable, and I would just prefer a wide receiver in the flex. For the Eagles, I was very happy with what I saw from that offense. I mean, Hurts looked good, not only from like fantasy, like he looked like a good NFL, like franchise quarterback. But then also, like, he was opening up running lanes clearly for Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders looked really good. And then I was happy to see a 2 running back committee, not a 3 running back committee. I didn't want 3 running backs rotating in here, and that's not what we got. We got clearly Sanders as the 1, Gainwell as the 2. It looks like Boston Scott is going to be the direct backup to Miles Sanders. So I don't think we can say that definitively, but we can say definitively that Boston Scott is 3rd. I would say that it's possible if Sanders went down, Gainwell sees a really big role. But my expectation would be if Miles Sanders got hurt, then Gainwell would get like 5 to 7 more carries, a few more targets, and then Boston Scott would get like significantly more carries, obviously, because he like didn't even play really last week. I just think that Sanders, I don't want to call him matchup proof because I want to see this offense prove it to me a little bit more, prove it to me for one more week you can consistently play well, because maybe the Falcons are just awful, right? But I think you're starting Sanders this week. And I think that Gainwell, if you're in a full PPR league that's like deep, like 14, 16 teams, you could consider him. But I'd probably just rather keep him on my bench. He needs to be owned in all formats because he could be used like a Naheem Hines. But I would probably prefer in most formats, 8, 10, 12, most 14-team leagues, keep him on the bench, watch his usage for one more week. Next up, we've got the Saints at the Panthers. This game has a pretty low 45-point total, especially for a Saints game. And it's actually been bet down. It opened at 46, down to 45, and the Saints are 3.5-point road favorites. For the Saints, pretty easy. Always start Kamara. For the Panthers, always start McCaffrey. The only other player I should talk about here is Tony Jones. I don't believe you're starting him. He got more work last week than he typically would since it was a blowout, so they just gave the backups more run. But he needs to be owned. He's like Gainwell. He needs to be owned in every league. Tony Jones would have elite production if Kamara would ever go down, so you got to have him. Rams at Colts is up next. This game is a 45.5-point total. The Rams are 3.5-point road favorites. For these Rams, Henderson played 94% of the snaps in week 1. He had 17 touches. He ran a route on 78% of dropbacks. That is elite usage. My only hesitation here is that was this usage so high because Sony didn't join the team until like a few days before the game? I guess it wasn't like days, but it was very close, right? He didn't join the team at the beginning of camp. He was traded for at the end of camp. And so has Sony had enough time to fully learn the playbook, fully get accustomed to this offense? I don't know the answer to that. And was that the reason that Henderson played so much? And like every week, it'll slowly get closer and closer because, I mean, when you were listening to like Adam Schefter talk about this trade, what he was saying was like they expect by the end of the season to be using Sony a lot in early downs. And that's not what happened in week 1. So that's kind of why I'm thinking this. I think we're going to get that answer over these coming weeks. But as of right now, I'm not expecting all of a sudden one more week to be enough time for Sony to just get equal usage to Henderson. And so I would be playing Henderson as a running back 2 this week, and I would not be playing Sony, but I think Sony definitely needs to be owned. For the Colts, obviously you're starting Jonathan Taylor. If you look at the snap share, he only played 55% of the snaps. You might be concerned. It doesn't matter. Snap share is less important for Jonathan Taylor because when he's in there, they're using him. 17 carries and a very encouraging 7 targets to along with 4 touches inside the 10-yard line. High touchdown upside, high yardage upside, apparently high reception upside. He's a monster. Always start him. It was really nice to see, though, the production of not only Taylor, but Taylor plus Hines. Like, we didn't want to see Hines come in and crush Taylor or Taylor to crush Hines. Having them both be viable is really nice to see. Hines had 9 carries, 8 targets, so the running backs combined for 38 touches, even in a loss. And we saw Jonathan Taylor use plenty in a loss, so that was encouraging to see. They didn't just go to Hines, they used both running backs. And so I think Hines is best reserved for like your second flex in a full PPR league, but I think it's fairly unlikely that you like need to go here this early in the season, right? We haven't had mass injuries. We haven't had a ton of bye weeks. And so if you're already starting Hines, I'm hoping that you went RB0 and now you're just like okay with it and it was a full PPR league. Other than that, if you're in like a typical 12-team league and you didn't go RB0, you should probably be able to keep Hines on the bench right now. Next up, we've got Raiders at Steelers. This game has a 47-point total, down from 48 points to open. And the Steelers are 5.5-point home favorites. For the Raiders, we need to watch the status of Josh Jacobs. He's been battling through a toe and ankle injury that is very clearly bothering him. He did score 2 touchdowns on Monday night, very encouraging, but he was still only able to score 16.5 fantasy points. Like 12 of those points were the touchdowns, right? He was inefficient. He wasn't using the passing game. And that's not that many fantasy points for 2 touchdowns, right? You should have so many more fantasy points. So I don't think many of you drafted Jacobs because I was avoiding him all summer. I think that if you did draft him, now's the time to sell because I just don't trust him at all. And he has no ceiling. That's the problem. It's like you're only scoring 16 points when you score 2 touchdowns. What are you scoring in fantasy if you don't score? It's not good, right? I think Drake needs to be obviously owned. He's a very, very exciting play if Jacobs were to ever miss some time. And hey, maybe, like, I'm recording this on Thursday. Maybe he does Wednesday? Thursday. I'm recording this on Thursday. Maybe Jacobs will be out this week. I don't know yet. And if that's the case, Drake is a must start. Until we see Jacobs out, I think Drake probably has to be on your bench, because even with them playing from behind, catching up last week, like, the volume was good in a full PPR league, but you can't count on that every week, and he just doesn't see enough volume on average to be worth the start. For the Steelers, Najee Harris was the only running back to see the field in week 1. He should be locked into your lineups even after a dud last week. You're playing him. I don't care what the matchup is. Next up, we got Patriots at the Jets, a game that I will personally be attending. It unfortunately has the lowest total of the week, so of course I'm going to the game with like the lowest total. But we have also seen some crazy line movement in this one. So this game has moved the most of any game in week 1. The Patriots open as 3.5-point road favorites. That's been bet up to 6. That's a pretty big jump from an opening line to where it is right now, and I guess I don't know where it's going to end at. For the Patriots, I mean, it's tough to know. Like, they said that Harris might see his role reduced after the fumble, but that's confusing because Stevenson also fumbled. So are they going to activate J.J. Taylor and mix him in? Are they going to give James White more looks? Like, he's not a guy you want getting carries. Give him receptions, but don't give him carries. And so I don't really know. I don't really know what's going to happen here. This is a fantastic spot, though. I mean, I know the total's not high, but the Jets have a bad defense, and the line is clearly shifting towards the Patriots. So for right now, until I hear something differently, I'm just assuming that Harris is still the guy. Maybe Stevenson gets more carries, but again, Stevenson was more a very high upside handcuff and a guy that we might rely on later down the season. He's not someone you should be starting or like needing to start right now. So I would say under that scenario, Harris is like a top 17 running back. Tough to know on James White. Like, are they going to give him more work? But this isn't really a game that sets up like a James White game. You want higher total games. You want the Patriots playing from behind. Both of those are opposites. A low total game. Patriots should be playing from ahead. So not really a game I want to start James White, but he's viable in the flex in the full PPR league, as he always is, because he can just rack up a ton of receptions. For the Jets, though, backfield's a mess. Don't touch any of them. If you want to own one, I honestly think Michael Carter is the only one I touch, just because he's clearly the most talented. And he's got the most upside, like, later in the season. I don't want Tevin Coleman. I don't want Ty Johnson. I know they're getting more work right now. There's no upside there. I would only want Michael Carter. Vikings at Cardinals up next. This starts a stretch of very, very high total games. So if you're like crushing your matchup, into the 4 o'clock games, you're winning a DK tournament at 4 o'clock. Honestly, you might not cash that tournament, and you might get dominated when your opponent starts to score points, because the next 5 games we go over all have totals north of 50. In the final game, the 6th one, has a total of 48.5, which is also very, very high. So a lot of high total games starting at the 405 or 425. I don't know when the first one is. Back to this one. Total set at 51 points. The Cardinals are 3.5-point home favorites. For the Vikings, obviously Dalvin Cook, no one else. For the Cardinals, Chase Edmonds is the more valuable back because of his pass catching role. And given the game environment, I think he's a quality running back to play. James Conner is fine in the flex, preferably a second flex spot for me. And you just got to know that you're going to be disappointed if he doesn't score a touchdown. Again, high total game, good chance of scoring a touchdown. Just understand that. Like, Edmonds is going to get close to 100% of the running back targets if he doesn't get 100%. And so you're going to need a touchdown from James Conner. Falcons at Bucks is up next. This game has a 52-point total, and the Bucks are 12-point home favorites. For the Falcons, Mike Davis got a decent workload, but this offense, it just looked so bad in week 1. And this is also probably the most difficult matchup you can have on the road in Tampa. So I don't have Mike Davis. I don't have Cordero Patterson, but if I did, I wouldn't be playing him this week. For the Bucks, Ronald Jones is supposedly out of Arians' doghouse and is going to get the start. But I personally do not buy that. I don't think that we can know that he's just like, everything's forgiven, right? Like the fumbles are forgiven and all the pass blocking mistakes are forgiven and you're just going to start and play every snap now. Like, that's just not going to happen. Fournette's going to mix in. We know Bernard's going to get third down snaps and 2-minute drill snaps. So even if Jones is getting a majority of early downs, there's only so much upside because they're not completely benching Fournette unless they make Fournette inactive. If on Sunday morning they make Fournette inactive or they made Ronald Jones inactive and Fournette was a starter, if either of those scenarios happen, I want to play the one that's active, especially in this matchup. Huge home favorites against a bad defense, yeah. I just don't trust either of them. I didn't draft either of them. I don't want either of them. If you did and you like desperately need to play one, sure, it is again a great spot, but I would not feel good about it even knowing that Ronald Jones is starting. I don't see myself, if I had them, playing them. Next up, we've got Dallas at the Chargers. This game has an insanely high 55.5 point total, and the Chargers are up to 3.5 point favorites after opening as 3-point home favorites. The Cowboys always start Zeke, and Pollard needs to remain on benches as just like the ultimate high upside handcuff. For the Chargers, I know the box score wasn't fantastic, but I liked what I saw from Eckler in week 1. I'm very encouraged about his upside, his floor. I think he's set up to explode this week, and so there's absolutely no way in the world I'd be benching him. Titans at Seahawks is up next. This game has a 53.5 point total. Seahawks are 5-point home favorites. We have another easy game to go over. Always start the King, always start Chris Carson, and honestly don't touch any other running backs on these teams. The Sunday night game will be Kansas City at Baltimore. It should be a really, really fun game to watch. This one has a 55-point total, and the Chiefs are 3.5-point road favorites after opening as 2.5-point road favorites. So the total or the spread is being bet in their favor. For the Chiefs, Clyde had a very rough week 1, but he did play 72% of the snaps, which is a lot, and he did have 14 carries, 3 targets. That's like pretty good volume. Now, the Browns also have like a really, really good defense, so those struggles make sense. Problem is, Baltimore also has a really good defense, and so Clyde also might just be like a really, really good buy low after this week. The thing is, like, he's a starting running back on Kansas City, and so I have him in one of 3 leagues. I will definitely be starting him because they scored a ton of points, they get a ton of yards, he's on the field a ton. Like, you just basically have to start Clyde unless somehow you have like 3 top 10 running backs, in which case you don't need this video, you won your league. For the Ravens, I have much less confidence in Tyson Williams than everyone else seems to have. He did have a really nice touchdown run and he looked pretty good, but he didn't get all that much total work. He missed a huge block that cost him the game. And they're at least adding Freeman this week. Maybe they'll also add Bell as well. And they've already come out and said they want to use all 4 running backs. I have Williams as a running back 29 right now, but I think that's going to drop a little bit. And I have him on the bench. So in my 14-team league, full PPR, 2 flex spots, I have benched him. I played him last week, but I'm benching him now. And honestly, I don't even think he's the first guy off the bench, right? He's not like, oh, it's him or another guy. I feel like there's another bench option that I'd rather play over him. I do not have a ton of confidence in Williams this week. I do think he's a really, really good sell high. Final game of the week is Monday Night Football. We've got a classic. You know, the Lions take on the Packers. This one has a 48.5 point total, and the Packers are massive 11-point home favorites. For the Lions, Swift is a weekly must start because his receiving usage was through the roof last week. I don't think Williams is a must start, but in our 16-team full PPR subscriber league, I currently have him in at the 2nd flex spot. My choice is between him, James White, and Bryan Edwards. As of right now, I'm thinking I'm going to use Jamal Williams. You can check the rankings though, if those 2 happen to go above Williams, which I don't expect to happen. But if that were to happen, I'll flip it in my roster. But yeah, right now I'm expecting to use Jamal Williams. And then for the Packers, obviously, like, you're starting Aaron Jones as an 11-point home favorite against a really, really bad Lions defense. I would say A.J. Dillon, if you're in a 16-team league, I wonder if I have him in that league. I might have him in that league. I'm not actually sure. But if you're in like a 16-team league, you need him in your second flex, go for it. I think we need to see it for 1 week. I really do believe they're going to use A.J. Dillon more than people are assuming, but I want to see that play out in a game that's competitive first, and then we can reassess playing A.J. Dillon. He's the ultimate high upside handcuff along with Tony Jones, along with Tony Pollard. These are guys you want because they'll just explode if the starter goes down. But right now, I'm probably keeping A.J. Dillon on the bench. So that is my breakdown for every matchup this week. Remember, you can see my exact rankings and projections under every scoring format by just looking at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And if you want more content, I am going to be posting daily videos on my TikTok. Some of those will be posted here, but others will not be. So if you want to see those, there will be a link in the description box. It's the one that says linktree/FFA. Or you can just search Nick Zylak in Discover over there. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.